Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. The three of us are here, but in order to make it smooth and swift, there will be only two people presenting. I'm responsible for the first part and the European policies and Europeanization. This is part for Bożena Gierat, my colleague. Not to waste or lose time, the conference is all about ESK and ECOC, and very much like the sociologists of the Wrocław University, they were examining the impact of the ECOC as such as it happened. We were about evaluating the competition between year 2011 and 2016. What did this competition mean, and how did this competition impact the cultural policies of the cities, and what is the follow-up or the continuation of that, what's left after that? Now, our main thesis was that the competition the time of the competition, 2007-2011, that happened in a very convenient context. The competition had a great potential, entailing changes, triggering changes in terms of culture and society. So we assumed that there were certain beneficial variables to support it. Now, the Polish cities at that time were through the period of the transformation. It did not happen in 1989, it happened a decade later, and well, we don't need to make any references about it because everybody knows about it. And that was all about post-Ford economy, creative cities, etc. And it all started at the beginning of the new millennium. The ECOC competition happened right after the Polish accession. There was huge potential and a huge diffusion, cultural diffusion. Poland became a destination country for many visitors, and Poles started visiting other countries. So Poland became the area of diffusion, cultural diffusion. And there was a change, social and economic change. Poland began to urbanize. This urbanization began taking place, as a phenomenon began taking place right after the Second World War. But this true movement happened as late as then. There were so many actors, so many people interested, and the urban community in a way became very dynamic, and it all helped to dynamize the processes. Now, our survey method, our research method was the qualitative method, so in-depth interviews with two classes or categories of respondents, and we analyzed or reviewed the bids, the applications of the competitors. We know that 11 cities decided to take part in the competition. We did not aim at research covering all the 7 cities. We wanted to highlight irregularities, but you can see we have our publication. The publication is available in the lobby, and you can see the criteria along which we selected: Katowice, Lublin, Łódź, Szczecin, Wrocław. We ran the survey over year 2016, and we had 60 interviews with the opinion makers or opinion leaders. We approached institutions, so we approached those people who were responsible for developing developing applications and professionals who manage culture in different cities. And there was also a group of informal leaders, journalists, bloggers. We wanted a critical point of view on the ECOC impact. Now, moving on to the results of the survey, we have a lot of information, a very rich material. In my view, the most important impact of the ECOC competition was the social and economic change, social and cultural change. So it was sort of identifying the great city. The first thing that we noticed was the identity of the city. I know that it is not a very definite notion. We know that the identity of the city exists, and we can try to somehow reconstruct it. But in general, the competition also triggered a debate about the urban, about the city, and the city values. So if we look back to year 2007, what did we have as urban culture? We didn't have any urban culture. Polish cities appeared drained, mainly due to historical reasons. And the culture of the competition somehow compelled people to discover genius loci. The debate about the genius loci used to be held. They had been held before the there were niche debates among activists, among certain actors. But suddenly this debate became publicized to some extent, and all the media were disseminating information. Now, there was another important thing, the so-called superficial or misrecognition, if we can say that. Certain cities, Łódź, Katowice and cities, were somehow, after the transformation in 1989, they seemed to be going down, and all those cities were seen or perceived as the epitome of what may happen in a city of post-industrial city with social pathology, no industry, unemployment, which doomed to failure. To some extent, that was the image. Lublin is in the east part of Poland and traditionally perceived as Poland B, remote, backward, underdeveloped areas or regions. So in the area presentations, we've been able to see during the conference how successful Lublin was due to the competition. Lublin was able to reject this negative perception. Its eastern roots were perception of eastern roots were converted to positive perception. And now the next thing was the competition team, except for Poznań, because Poznań hired an external contractor, a PR company from Warsaw. But most of the cities created very specific teams. They had close links with the city council with a city hall, but they were not that bureaucratic by nature. So they could attract people who were sort of in the outskirts of the bureaucracy, people from the so-called off areas, of municipality areas. Now this communitas sphere made it possible for different people to join the competition teams. Now, policies and the Europeanization. Now, thank you. Thank you. Okay. Now, let me finish. I was responsible for the cultural policy of Polish cities. Very briefly, the cultural policy of Polish cities defined by the 1999 Act, and that was an organizing cultural activities. This Act of Parliament gives a framework, strong formal framework for developing culture in urban environment. So all the institutions have to comply with the law. What we were examining, exploring, was simply looking at the law and can we see any impact on or any organizational change, bearing in mind the law, any change as a result of the city being responsible for carrying out the city, the town hall, being responsible for carrying out, taking the city through the competition procedure, the bidding procedure. So were there any lessons learned, any implementations made within the institutions of culture as a result? And there are good things and there are bad things about it, so positive and negative things. Obviously, some respondents noticed the change of generations. Certain ideas from the application form were adopted into the cultural strategy of the city, and people changed their attitude to their work for the municipality as civil servants or just as officials working for the municipality. The style of management did not change, but there were some impulses. People began to understand what the NGOs were about and new ideas. They simply got familiar to new ideas, and this is how these ideas get into the city's strategy. And then the understanding of the partners. There is the organization office. There were activists, journalists, bloggers. All those people felt that they had been empowered and they could influence or shape the future of the city. They became in a way, focal, and they were, in a way, actors. There was all the empowerment, and we were looking at the time between 2007 and 2011, and the cultural policy became a topic, a subject to be discussed. Well, certainly there are some changes in terms of investment into new institutions of culture, and the city will develop and also develop through institutions. Now, local authorities have noticed the necessity of cultural research. No change. No, we could see the positive things, the changes. Negative, there was no change, so there was no leap. In many cases, that was simply to protect one's status quo, and then this festivalization. There is lots of enthusiasm, and then there are certain doubts how to adjust the strategy, in which it was pretty obvious. And then artists, how they see any changes or projected changes, how they relate to the whole area of protecting their own interest. So there was a change in the relation between the official and the artist, but only those with some shall we say, some work, some achievements, well-established artists could better benefit. The perception was that, all in all, the ECOC was about shaping the image of the country, so Polish artists would be promoted in a natural way. And last but not least, one of the themes, if we're talking about Europe, being European, Europeization, these are very enigmatic, some of them are very enigmatic. European dimension, for example, it is defined. It's defined by European policy. We asked about the European and becoming a European. Being European, it's developing certain awareness and understanding, a sense of autonomy, the sense of autonomy, or for the city. Cities must be independent or seen as independent. We speak of the independent nature of self-government. Freedom and independence were treated by our respondents as European aspect or part of the European nature. And it's all about axiology, independence, and creative autonomy. Now, the dimension, European dimension. Now, this is something that is defined in the decision launching the program. The respondents had various opinions. They mention is the mega star festival, big events, huge promotion of the city. Many respondents were negative, or at least what they said was negative. There is big hustle, the sort of razzle-dazzle around the city. Creating a European city means that there is a lot of talk about the city and a lot of hustle. Now, becoming European meant a different style of management, how to learn how to adopt new ways of management, managing cultural institutions and managing the city culture. So some hope that the ECOC could offer human resources in terms of a manager. It's not a new category in terms of profession or occupation. For the last 27 years, we've had managers in place, but it's a large international project, and there will be a manager with a knowledge of languages, capable of managing a project like this, a project of scale. Such managers will have new skills and new knowledge, and they will be creating a new city, a modern city managed in a progressive way, a liberal city, a free city, and this city will become part of the whole network in Poland and in Europe. Urban network. Our respondents value democracy, maybe because they had to fight for it, but we need to be careful about democratic management process, transparency, reasons and rationale given for various decisions, so such rationale provided to culture operators, and this democracy should be seen in the management of the institutions of culture. Just to finish, you can pick up the book. We've published our results, and there are two website addresses, Kraków Nomos Publishing House.
Thank you very much for this presentation. This is a moment to write down the addresses, and now the next presentation from France. And those of you who would like to take the headphones, no, this presentation will be in English, but those of you who would like to take the headphones with translation into Polish, you can do it. Elena Ryszewicz, Maxim Żyfre. Europejskie Stolice Kultury jako tkanka pamięci zbiorowych. Co pozostaje? Over to you, the microphones are working.
Hello everyone, and thank you for your attention. So we are coming from French National Research Center. We are based in Marseille, and we will present some results of our research focused on European Capital of Culture. So we are engaged with Maxime Jaffray and our colleague Emmanuel Pedler, who is unfortunately not here today, in a research project supported by French National Research Agency. Our project's name is Curricula, the Cultural Crucible, the Reorganization and Renewal of Institutions in the Cultural Capital Landscape. So here we present the aims of our research project, just to analyze the cultural dynamics in different European cities and regions, compare different territories with highly contrasting historical and cultural profiles, focus on the influence of immersive cultural institutions, heritage industry on urban territories, measure the capacity of cultural institutions to participate and to implement European cultural policy programs, seek to understand obstacles for the inclusion of population fully integrated in local cultural life. So we started our project in 2013, and we were granted in 2014. We started to be financed, supported by French National Research Agency, but we seek to integrate a larger European program. So here how we position our problem in several issues related to European policies. So here we have European cohesion, regional and urban policies, and their cultural dimension more particularly. The second issue, the problem, is reorganization and renewal of heritage industry. So here is the axis focused on cultural and creative industries, smart specialization strategies. The third is European highly heterogeneous regions and cities. So we have a comparative dynamic. These three problems have something is common. This common thing is perception of Europe by its citizens. So today we will present some results related to the memories of what stays after the European program. So here is one of the central problems questions we'd like to respond. So next one. So just to respond to these questions, we tried to do a comparative scope, just to choose several cities with contrasting territorial and geographical profiles, and a very diverse city geographically, in former and in actual European capital of culture, and in countries with different administrative structure. It means more centralized and decentralized countries. So here you can see that we have current ECC in Umeå. It's relatively current, but it's current in relation to the beginning of our research program, like Marseille and Wrocław. Former ECC Warsaw as city candidate, it's like an exception from the logic of our research scope, but we tried to also have a case study of the city that tried to be European capital of culture, but didn't manage, and this is the case of Warsaw. And as a former ECC, former, it means that we will use more historical research methods than actually ethnography. More socio-historical approach than ethnographical approach in Italian cases. So here we can see that the case studies we actually studied are here. We started in 2013 from two French cases. That's very central, Lacquerie National Center, downtown Marseille. Then the second, it's Le Merlin National Scene. In Sweden, Västerbotten Ethnographic Museum and very central Northland Operan. In Warsaw, we implemented our survey with Polski Setter and Zacheta Art Gallery. So we are trying to understand how these institutions, very heterogeneous, situated in city downtown and in suburbs, very different profiles, responded to European policies in the case of these three countries. So today we will present some results related to our French and Swedish cases, because Polish cases we just started recently, so it's under our analysis actually. The second phase of our research will start in 2017 and will finish in 2 years. So we are actually focused on Palazzo Ducale in Genoa in Italy. We have partners there, whereas in Poland, Wrocław case study and Bologna case study in Italy. We are trying to define the institution that would like to collaborate with us in this second phase of our project. So what we are actually doing, and one of the aims of our presence here, it's just to make more contact and to establish the new dialogue with Wrocław cultural institutions. So what are actually our questions, our main questions we are focused on? So how do theaters, museums, operas, concert halls, etc. renew their scope and redefine the relations they have with their audiences during the ECC year? How these institutions react to restructuring of the competitive field? Are they becoming more modern, or are they becoming even more obsolete in the context of new European policies and the new apparition of the new form of cultural participation of European citizens? How the audiences that are poorly integrated in the local cultural life, especially young people from immigration, how do they react to the transformation of these institutions? Are they becoming more attracted by the cultural institution, or we are in opposite dynamic, or where European presence contribute to further segregation and cultural segregation? And the third question, what kind of memories from the ECC cultural offers do the target population keep during several months, years, or even decades after these events? How do the ECC cultural offers stimulate or not cultural mobilities throughout Europe? Are there any differences of perception between the cultural programs induced during the ECC year and the ordinary programmation of cultural institutions? So what are actually the impacts of the European programs on the spirit of the people? Are they becoming more European in their mind, or not at all? We are actually trying to measure the following consequences of ECC on cultural institutions. So in France, in Sweden, in Poland, the common thing is that cultural institutions become more inclusive in the European context. They renew their institutional branding. The direction in many cases in Umeå, in Marseille, and even in Wrocław is changed. They have new artistic collaborations with European partners, with local partners, with cultural institutions, and so on and so forth. And more generally, they start to have the new interaction with the local environment. So what are the memories, what are the memories, the perceptions, the new cultural experience related to this changement, and what is the role of the European cultural policy in that? Or there are the other factors which are not actually coming in our mind, but which are important just to measure, to perceive these changements. So what we are actually doing as methodology of our project. We're doing statistical analysis of ticket office databases. For this, we have a long and bilateral dialogue with cultural institutions. So when we establish good connection, they actually share with us their ticket office databases that contain several data on their audiences. We are actually elaborating paper and online questionnaire surveys. We are doing the questionnaire in collaboration with cultural institutions. The principle here is to have the same template of the questionnaire just to establish the comparison between institutions and between countries, but also to add some questions that interested every institution and respects its particularities. So it's comparative and at the same time it respects the local specific demands. With our cartographic software, we are doing bottom-up cartography of European urban mobilities and local cultural geography. We are doing historical surveys in Italy, particularly, and we are doing the ethnography of institutional governances. So very quickly, I will present, for instance, the cartographical approach. Here you can see the Marseille setters. And that what kind of analysis we can do just on a neighborhood level, just to see what are the neighborhood from which the people, the setter audiences are actually coming, and to establish the city geography. And here is the other map, just as example, just to see from which other countries and regions in France the audiences of our setters are coming, so what are the local mobilities in the regional or national scale. So now quickly, we have not very much time.
Thank you. Yeah, we will try to manage. Okay, so from what Elena just said and presented, basically we are analyzing the data we are collecting from the institutions from different methodologies. One is, of course, the ticket office database that we analyze, also by collecting from questionnaire, survey, online questionnaire that we send from sometimes to newsletters belonging to the institution. So, as you can see, Elena presented, you have, once we have the data can be differently presented, such as on this one here, we have two theaters. We are comparing two theaters that are actually located in different parts of the city. Here we have the La Criée Theatre, which is located in very historical and central place of Marseille. Whereas here, the Le Merlan National Scene is another theater. It's a more modern theater, but is located in a suburb, in a quite difficult neighborhood. And that is important to underline, I think. And it's located at the same time in a supermarket, a big Carrefour. In Wrocław, you know Carrefour as well. So it's located in Carrefour, in a big shopping mall, and in the middle of the suburb. So in Marseille, it makes sense to present it. So right now, I will present some data. It's a very fresh and raw data collected from institutions we have from Le Merlan and from Umeå, Northland Operan. So it's not presented like you can see here on the map, because here it takes some time and work to make it. So right now I'm presenting the data. So what remains once the ECC has been implemented in different cities, and what remains on the collective memory of ECC. So right now, when we talk about the memory of ECC, what remains, you think about the audience most of the time. For instance, because the aim of the European policies is probably the most important thing, to change and to renew the audiences. So once the ECC program is implemented into institutions, the institution has to be more open, as Elena presented, to be more inclusive with new populations. So the first thing is to look at focus on the audiences and the social profile of audiences. So here we have, sorry, because I don't see otherwise. Here we have on the right, sorry, it's still in French. So it's, as I said, it's very raw and fresh data. So it still requires to be analyzed and presented differently, because. So we are sorry to have this kind of tables, but I will comment it and try my best to make it easy to read. So here it's in French, but here you can see that for Le Merlin Theatre, the main audience concern is higher level professions. So after 1 year or 2 years after the ECC. In the case of the Northland Opera in Umeå in Sweden, it's interesting to see that the main audience are retired. Second is our school teachers, medical assistants. We call it in France intermediate professions. And it's coming at third position, higher level professions. So you can see that you have difference between of context in cities such as Marseille and Umeå. Umeå, of course, is a much smaller city than Marseille, and has a different context. Umeå is a very dynamic and student-friendly city, whereas Marseille is not that very friendly to students, I would say. But it's interesting to see that the main population concerned by the program of the institution, Northland Opera, are retired. That's interesting to underline. So, second, we can compare by, of course, by a level of diploma. I will finish. I'm going fast. So I will move to the what. So we have basically the different questions on. Have you ever attended the events during the ECC year, such as in Umeå, Marseille, and Wrocław, for instance? And then we ask, what did you attend, and do you have a memory? Can you mention what kind of events you attended? So we have a sense of the memory that remains on the audience, and then we can sort these kind of memories of if it is this memory belongs to the program of implemented by institution during the ECC, because every institution has to change its program during the time of the ECC year. Whereas, so is it belonging to this kind of program, a renewal program, or the traditional and classical program? So that makes difference in terms of what remains if the audience is used to, to attend classical theater pieces, for instance, and so these are basically some results. And so, for instance, here do you have memory of this cultural event? So we have yes and no, but we have also a list of the events attended. So if it's presented like this, but here it's not the events, but we're also asking to people, did you go to other European capital of culture in Europe? So did you attend other events in Europe? So to analyze the dynamics and the circulation between European cities elected ECC. So in the case of Umeå, you can see that you have Swedish people are moving pretty much everywhere in Europe. It's interesting. Whereas in Marseille, from the Merlin Theatre, you can see that surprisingly, we were surprised because they are actually moving quite a lot in Europe as well. But it's more in the closer countries. So it's not that much we cannot see, you know, we don't have Polish cities or Swedish cities. So it's interesting to analyze the mobilities inside Europe between countries, since the European policies are aim is to make people move inside Europe. Thank you very much.
Thank you kindly. Thank you. Okay, so now we switch back to Polish. Przełączamy się ponownie na język polski. Prezentacja
and presentation by Dawid Krasiński and Jola Banaś. Dawid Krasiński as the presenter. The context of Wrocław and European capital of culture. Wrocław, backyard door, integration or provocation.
Dzień dobry Państwu. Chciałbym podsumować dzisiaj.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen, and I'd like to summarize the project that Jola Banaś and I evaluated. We're responsible for the evaluation, and initially we thought it was nothing but pleasure. But the discourse around this project became pretty number of people with balanced opinions. There were other people very keen on it, or simply showed a hostile attitude. Now, let me introduce the backyard door, the project itself, and then I'll try to answer the key question. Was it a successful integration of the local community or a provocation? Provocation about art, community art, and provocation to generate conflicts in local communities. And I will simply refer to 4 questions. The first things, did it bring any social activation? Did it bring any effects? Was it any impact in terms of activating people? Or as part of the backyard, were there any activities that reached people in the risk group of social exclusion, so the final target group? So, and finally, as a backyard door, the backyard door as a project, did it change the backyard? Did it change the face of the state? Now, the backyard, in my view, was a laboratory, because the authors, the artists, decided to bring certain installations with various artistic techniques employed. There were local Polish artists and international artists. It was about introducing different forms of art into the urban space locally, and in this way provoke or activate, stimulate the local communities. Were they successful doing so? Now, from the theoretical point of view, the project seems to be well targeted in terms of activation, and it's done almost by the book how to activate a local community. It goes in line with all the advice or all the guidelines. So we need to recognize, we need to identify the local community, and we had to give or empower the local community to decide on the forms or influence the form. It was important to bring in external artists, make them identify what's going on in those yards or courtyards or estates. They were supposed to meet the local community and find those means of measures of such activities that would be recognized and appreciated by a local community. During this evaluation, we were able to identify successful examples. What kind of products were they? They were sort of intangible projects. They were not about creating a physical piece of art in a courtyard. One of the best examples is making a film together with the local residents, neighborhood. The artist responsible for this film, she simply came in and met the residents. She didn't know what film they would make. She was very flexible, and due to her flexibility, she was able to engage a lot of people. It both strengthened the local relations, but it also gave them something new. They became amateur directors or filmmakers. They invited the artist again. They were planning to invite her once more, and they knew that there was a group of people who wanted to do something for this particular estate or this particular residential neighborhood. What was important was that the projects were to be influenced or influenced by the residents. So a couple of such projects happened, and they were successful, and they contributed to the sort of leisure time recreation. There was a wooden structure with a function of a bench, probably, but people, this installation looked like something you could develop. People would bring in and somehow bring in lots of different things, artifacts, and change it. So the back door created some potential, and this potential could be sustained after the project, including people in the risk group of exclusion. But the activists were those who were not really risked or threatened by exclusion. And those people were given an opportunity to meet others who were also full of enthusiasm and therefore able to continue together. The backyard door did not change the face of the estates. Most of the installations were criticized and not appreciated by the residents. There were also a great number of installations who were provocative, and they turned against the organizers. The organizers were treated as the municipality, the local authorities, and they were treated, they were targeted by the local communities with criticism and lots of complaints against the local authorities. Now, there were some difficult installations, and in many cases, the certain assumptions in the project stigmatized those local communities which took part in it, because everything was somehow designed to these neglected parts and run-down parts of the city, or run-down estates. On many local communities were expecting some improvements as a result of the project, but the local residents, they understood there is a budget and there's funding, and suddenly, instead of meeting their simple expectations, suddenly money is spent on an abstract installation, difficult in perception, to be perceived. There were different projects. There were projects relating to graveyards and cemeteries destroyed after the Second World War, and the flood as a traumatic time. It was probably too progressive, because people did not want to take part, did not want to go through it again. The organizers seem to have forgotten how local communities may perceive this intervention. They perceived it on many occasions as intrusion, as the sort of intrusion on the ownership of certain urban space, and therefore rejected by the local community. And to much extent, the project was translated into was interpreted as an innovative event, but not meeting the needs of the local communities. Someone else became the main recipient or beneficiary of those projects, mainly artists. And so the backyard door did not contribute to this sort of cultural and social aspect, and the beneficiaries were not mainly local residents, and a greater contrast was revealed, and there was a stronger sense of being ignored and by the municipality and the city hall. So, but based on the positive experience, we given some suggestions as to avoiding or lessons to be learned for the future in order to use the potential of similar projects in the future. Now, this sequence goes from the moment we need to identify the true needs and meet the expectations or create certain expectations, because what's important, the follow-up period and what happens after, who's going to be responsible for the outcome of, for the actual project itself. And in our view, such projects such as the backyard door should be combined with the restoration or repair of the estate, the neighborhood, or this courtyard. This may be a way or a method in order to properly maintain this space. It's not very obvious if you look at various restoration projects. We need to think about who is the real actor, not the artist, who from the backyard door we can see that not every artist will be capable of coming over the barriers, and maybe some expert insight would be appreciated here. The interactive nature of the activities. We can't enter the local community and the space with a ready product in a way. We want to build an installation and finally it's going to be rejected. In Wrocław, there is a Wrocław example, it's one of the districts. The artist made a lot of effort in order to identify the place, to learn about the place, to get knowledge as much as possible, but the installation was too much a contrast between the neglected environment and whatever was created there. So a project like this is worth continuing, but we should be listening to residents, and I think this must have been missed. Now, thank you. Now, before we have Kamil Glinka and his presentation, now he's going to talk on towards real participation, culture and strategic programming of urban development processes, example of Lower Silesia. David and Jolanta's report is, you can access this report on Wrocław 2016 website and the repository of Wrocław University. And now over to Kamil from the Institute of Politology at Wrocław University. Now, ladies and gentlemen, may I just apologize in the first place for my absence in due time, and thank you very much for having me now, waiting for me. As a representative of the Institute of Politology of the Wrocław University, I'd like to draw your attention to programming of urban development processes in the context of culture. The key role is the analysis, the dependence analysis, the analysis of interdependencies between the strategic programming, which can be recognized intuitively, and also the growth of culture or enlargement of culture. It may also be which may be understood as the greater participation or the extent of participation, as well as the impact that the institutions of culture may have. Now, we'd like to look at the figures that come from the main statistical office. I looked at the cities of over 50,000 in terms of population, and that would be class 5, class 6, class 7. Now, Wrocław is obvious, but there are three smaller cities, and these cities are county cities or powiat cities: Wałbrzych, Legnica, and Jelenia Góra. We marked them on the map. In year 2017, the Respublika Foundation, the DNA team commissioned by the National Center of Culture, prepared a ranking for urban culture, and the sort of culture friendliness index was developed, and that would be. It was based on accessibility or availability of culture and the environment, cultural environment, and the funding of culture, as well as the voluntary organizations or non-government, non-public organizations. And I'd like to refer that to Lower Silesia and the other cities in Poland, as well as the 4 cities in Lower Silesia. The leader in Lower Silesia is Jelenia Góra. Jelenia Góra ranks as 8, then followed by Wrocław, ninth position. Then Legnica and Wałbrzych rank as 15 and 28. Each city, however, is within the first 30 cities out of 100. Urban policy and urban development processes can be considered or examined in various contexts. If we are thinking about the dynamics and the complexity of processes, human resources, capital resources, the necessity to support, to build the support for the local authorities, by the key thing for the culture in urban development processes is the shaping or developing the sense of identification among residents and meeting residents' needs. I'd like to refer to the national urban policy, back to a law passed in 2015, and there are main areas of urban policy identified there. One is public participation, and this area of urban policy, this is where we have the participation in urban culture, so broadly, in a broad sense. The authors of the document speak of the sort of adoption of various strategic documents. The relationship between the national and local urban policy is probably best characterized by Silverman. He states that this urban policy is really the domain of managing different, coping with different interests, dealing with different groups of interests. Now, Professor Hausner states that strategic programming may take different forms, various sectoral programs like sustained environmental policy, as well as resolutions. In my view, from my point of view, it's general strategies and specific strategies. Now, working hypothesis, specific strategies adopted by the authorities of Wrocław, Wałbrzych, Jelenia Góra, Legnica, they are the assumptions for the local policy, and obviously culture is included there. Based on this assumption, the main actor responsible, my agent responsible for the cultural policy, the agent that should respond to various stimuli, are the self-government agencies and departments or groups. So there we go. We have a key, and I'm trying to find out or establish where the problems of culture appear. When we speak of specific strategies, I just tried to identify whether there are any in place or they are non-existent. Now, in terms of general strategies, in each of the cities, Wrocław, Wałbrzych, Legnica, Jelenia Góra, they have such a document, but the legislator imposes no duty to develop such strategy.
Each of them constitutes a version of the updating of a document that was binding before, and they undergo further modifications, and in each case the elements of culture are undertaken and analyzed. It results on the one hand from the specific character of the research proceeding and the solutions, the conceptual solutions that are based on the resolutions of the city councils. I deal only with those documents that are official documents, that is adopted by the city councils of Wrocław, Wałbrzych, Jelenia Góra. I do not indicate any documents that constitute, for example, a reference point to the activity of particular offices or organizational units. Ladies and gentlemen, what does it look like in case of the strategies of culture in Lower Silesia? As you can see, the data is current. Each of the cities elaborates and implements particular specialist strategies. In case of Jelenia Góra, a leader in reference to the satisfying of the improvement in culture. We have 5 documents. In Wałbrzych, which takes the 28th place, we have 17 documents. What is especially characteristic and symptomatic, none of the cities' research does not have a specialized strategy as understood by a document elaborated by the city council. Ladies and gentlemen, trying to answer the question formulated at the beginning, I'm forced to indicate lack of positive dependence between elaborating a specialist strategy in the qualitative aspect and the improvement in culture measured with this index of favoring culture. Let me underline that all the cities researched are in the first 30 places out of 100 cities researched. And this statement makes us think and makes us take into account other indicators that influence culture, starting with human factors. And what I mean here are the conceptual research papers conditioned by particular competencies recognized at the level of local government units. And I also mean here the meaning of organizational factors in the political science context, and we indicate here the efficiency of operation of city council units. A key thing here is the level of financial resources that the local government unit has, as well as the activities connected with maintaining or being competitive in relation to similar local government units. This last issue, connected with the meaning of the factors, constitutes a point for reflection, point for deliberation, and I hope that this is also a point thanks to which we can do more research. Here there is no positive dependence. Thank you very much.
Bardzo dziękujemy.
Thank you very much.
Szanowni Państwo,
Ladies and gentlemen, we have a quarter before the coffee break starts, so this is my pleasure to let you express your comments or ask questions. So you're welcome to do it now. Przede wszystkim miałam pewne pytania i komentarze.
Because your project idea is very interesting, but I have a lot of methodological doubts. Yes, which I think you should consider to really have this very interesting and fascinating topic research in a way that will pave new ways of understanding. First of all, I'm wondering why you chose specific cities, so selection of cities and then institutions within them, because this was not clear. If you selected institutions because you have contacts with them, that's fantastic, but I think you should select institutions that benefited, let's say, financially, for example, from European cultural capital funding. So this selection, and I'm also wondering about the selection of Warsaw as a city in Poland. Maybe it's because I'm from Krakow, but that's a different story we can talk about later. And the second major doubt is that if you're trying to see what was the effect of European cultural capital, you should do a longitudinal study, compare before and after. And what you've shown us is just a profile of visitors of an institution. And that's wonderful, but Bourdieu has researched this 40 years ago and found out that high educational profile, cultural capital, etc., contributes to higher representation of people with higher educational background and economic background within participants of certain institutions. So to really make it meaningful, you'd have to take into account those two factors: whether this institution participated in the European cultural capital, firstly, and secondly, before and after picture. A drugi komentarz, jeżeli można tak od razu, do ostatniej prezentacji.
Concerning the last presentation. Also, this is a very interesting issue, but there are two issues here. You are talking about the increase, the improvement of culture. Maybe development is a broader word, because the increase, for example, in the number of people, participants, the number of events, but it doesn't mean a qualitative change. And the second thing, it may not be so that there is no strategy for the development of cultures, but probably there may be different strategies that the city needs to include, so they do not form any unnecessary lives. I hope that Jelenia Góra has a strategy, and perhaps culture is included. For example, the structure of solving social problems and revitalization. So to reach deepened conclusions, we should take into account other strategies. But this is just my opinion, and you may or not take it into consideration. Thank you. Myślę, że możemy teraz rozpocząć od odpowiedzi od naszych francuskich.
So Elena will start to respond to your question, and we'll follow.
So your first question that concerns the choice of the institutions. So one of the important issues for us was to choose the heteronomous institution in each city. It means that we choose very different and very opposable profile of institution. For instance, in Marseille, La Criée Theatre, it's very central theatre with very classical background, whereas Le Merlin Theatre is something very peripheral and has a very different artistic profile. The same thing in Umeå, for instance, when we have a very central opera and more peripheral in geographical sense of thing, and very different in a way of express itself in the urban scale, urban landscape, Västerbotten Museum. That's the first thing, that the institutions are heteronomous in the sense of their position in the city and in the sense of their programmation. Second thing, that the dichotomy that you presented as just to have some network or to have the institution included in an European program, it's a dichotomy that doesn't exist for us, because we've chosen the institutions that are both impacted by the European program, you know, and at the same time we have very good connection with the institution. So there is no dichotomy, there is no conflict among these 2 points. We have combined that and we do it very well. Your other question concerned Warsaw, that was the third question. And the other one, because you had 3 questions. The audiences. As we presented or in our slideshow, there are several methods: cartographical, ethnographical, statistical. Statistical in different way, it means ethnographic detailed questionnaire, it means very different methods that we adapt to each institution. So we had 20 minutes just to speak out today, and we just couldn't present you all the massive of our data that comes from the different sources and comes from different years, because we started, for instance, in Marseille in 2013. It was the first survey by questionnaire, and we finished our other kind of questionnaire in Marseille just this summer in July. So as you can see, it's very durable, and we combine several methods.
Just add something to this question. This is one of our aim why we came in Wrocław as well. We were just in Warsaw 2 days before the conference, meeting our partners, and this is one of our essential aim, is to work with our partners in different countries and cities. And we cannot, of course, as you know, we are coming from Marseille, from France, and coming into a new city such as Wrocław for us is impossible to contextualize cultural and political and historical institution in their territory. It's impossible. So that's why we are working with our partners, and one of the most important aim for us for the future publication of this program is to contextualize politically, historically each institutions, and then start the analysis. So we don't want to publish something with raw data just as I did, and everything like numbers. No, it's more about ethnographic, historical, and then come the analysis. So we have the analysis before and after. The context, the idea of the context of the institution before the SAC, and then after. What happens after? Yeah.
And also our questionnaire, if you look at it, it's very detailed. And it combined like ethnographic approach, like we've discussed with the person, because it's not like, this questionnaire you found in the supermarket. We threw a question about gender, diploma level, and where you're living actually. Our questionnaire is very detailed. So it's like it demands an engagement from the person just to respond on it. So we are not like searching a big amount of responses on it. We find a more qualitative approach. And there is no conflict between the quality and quantity, because when you have like long-term program, you can just get your quantity. But the point is just not to make suffer your quality for the beginning, and this is our approach here.
Yeah, may I mention as well that our questionnaire, that our templates, comparable templates to each institution, contains about 40 questions. So it's about status, social status question, but as well about experience. What did you attend? What kind of show do you remember? And what do you think about it? And what do you think about the institution? Something like this. It's a long questionnaire. So as you mentioned, it requires a lot of something like a civil engagement from the people to respond. So it's interesting to analyze to differentiate these populations inside the institutions, the regular and the non-regular audiences. May I finish with the Warsaw case? Warsaw is, of course, a non-European capital of culture. I agree with you. But it was interesting because if you look at the history of the European Capital of Culture program, since the beginning, it was founded by Jack Lang and Mercury in the 80s. And it started with major capital in Europe. Paris, Stockholm, Madrid was capital. Does that make sense? After a while, the European Commission started to decide it's not necessary to add more support to these cities. So they started to look at different ways to support cities, and looking at smaller, more, like Marseille. Marseille was at the suburb of Europe until 2013. Then it was integrated into Europe. So now it's starting to, be revival and renewed by new urban programs such as Europe. So Warsaw, Pilsen, Umeå are these kind of new cities that are integrated in the European program. So when you look at it, you can understand why Warsaw lost the election, because Warsaw is a capital already. So it was interesting to look at Warsaw as a non-European capital, but candidate, and as major city in Europe. So that's why we decided to have this counter case, not because of our connections. Of course, we have good connections with our partners and institutions in Warsaw, but it was to look at Warsaw as I would say, poor candidate, because they lost the election. Thank you very much.
Okay, so let's give a chance to comment, to respond to a comment. Yeah.
Dziękuję bardzo za pytanie.
No, thank you very much for your question and very constructive critique. Maybe I used the Silverman's method sort of too much. I think we should simply include culture and in particular when we think about the qualitative aspect. And the second question, I agree, fully agree. Other specialist documents, I think I stressed them, and I spoke about programmed activities of local authorities in the area of culture and cultural activity. But I wanted to show the context where they failed to comply with the law. The local authorities are required to implement the so-called specific actions. And I wanted to show the deficit of this type of document, this type of program in place at the local level. That would be not so much at the strategic level, but operational level, to have operating plans, at least in different departments of municipal offices.